We are picking back up where we were on House Bill 2416. I've started a new list of those with amendments. It's pretty much the same list, but we're going to repeat some things. And I'm going to kick it off with another technical amendment, I believe. Is that correct, Natalie?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Let me get that distributed.
Perfect. Thank you. It's up on the screens, should be hitting your inbox anytime. Natalie, if it's okay, I'm going to have you explain this one since I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of our budget people noticed that in KSA 753711, which is a statute related to the State Finance Council, there is a reference to requiring unanimous votes when it is required to approve an action under KSA 48924. But under this current proposal, the State Finance Council would no longer have any action that they would be required to take pursuant to KSA 48924. So we're just bringing in that statute and striking the reference there to that KEMA statute. And then we also, thanks to Bob, he caught one of my typos on page 6, adding a the between extend and original in line 37. That's what that does.
Perfect. I will move that amendment. Is there a second? Representative Hoheisel? Any discussion? The longer we give Natalie to work this bill, the well, I mean, she does great work, but she's going to keep finding technical amendments. So let's get, anyway, let's see. It is in my inbox, so everybody take a chance to look at that and let me know if you have any questions or discussion.
But it needs to look like
Somebody's not muted. Okay, I don't see any questions or discussion, so I will move my technical amendment. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no.
No, because I didn't have time to look at it and get my question asked.
We can wait. We can wait. Hold on.
I appreciate it.
Nope.
Thank you for your courtesy. Could I ask a question?
You can absolutely ask a question, yes.
Thank you, my friend. Currently, is the LCC taking action by proxy vote, such as I think this is allowing for? Is that the way it's working now?
Mr. Chairman, the statute right now doesn't authorize the Legislative Coordinating Council to take any action under the Kansas Emergency Management Act. Current law handles those extensions through the State Finance Council. And so this is a State Finance Council statute that references the KEMA statute, because under the current process, that's listed in their requirements because it requires a unanimous vote. Which is also required in KSA 48924. But since we are removing the State Finance Council's participation in KEMA, replacing it with the Legislative Coordinating Council, this reference to KSA 48924 would no longer need to be in this State Finance Council statute.
Okay, I guess I'm not tracking then. And I apologize. So it helped me then understand this. At present, it's the Finance Council that's taking the legislative action, not LCC. And are they meeting remotely?
I believe they have been meeting remotely, although this amendment doesn't impact that. This is just about the unanimous vote requirement to take action under KEMA, but now the State Finance Council will no longer be required to take any action under KEMA because we're moving that responsibility to the Legislative Coordinating Council.
Okay, well, I don't want to delay the committee's proceedings. I can't really understand what we're doing here. I know the Attorney General tells us that we've got to meet the same room in Topeka, Kansas, and I know that our rules say, and arguably maybe the Attorney General says, that we have to be at the State House in order to vote in this committee. And I'm not following this concept of folks phoning it in on this, but maybe that is necessary. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you. I appreciate your courtesy, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry for the delay.
No worries. And just to clarify again, and in part making sure I understand the amendment, I think this is simply striking that one reference to 48,924. If you look at that balloon on, appears to be page 11, it's striking that reference. Is that primarily what we're getting at here, Natalie?
Yes, that is because this statute, which is a State Finance Council statute, put some requirements on their voting and their proceeding, not related to remote meetings necessarily, just that they have to have a unanimous vote required under KSA 48.924. Well, now they won't be taking any votes under KSA 48.924. And so it's just a technical change to fully move that role over to the Legislative Coordinating Council instead of the State Finance Council.
Mr. Chair, I now follow, and I was in error. Thank you.
Okay, good. Any other questions? If not, I will move my amendment again. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Let's go back to Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any further amendments, but maybe more of a comment. The piece that I struggle with in the bill now is exactly if an emergency, if a quick executive order is needed to be issued. The process right now looks like it would take maybe up to 48 hours to get the approval and the review by the AG and so forth. And so I've talked with Natalie about it a little bit and have some ideas, but I don't have anything right now. But I just wanted to kind of bring that up as a concern, because even though we try to identify the things that might that an executive order might cover and so forth, undoubtedly there's going to be things that we don't contemplate at this point and would need quick action, and to have a mechanism where that order could be issued quickly but still receive some review by the LCC and the AG at a point, I think would need to be developed, but I just don't have any a firm amendment at this point. So I'll just leave it at that, but thank you.
Representative Burris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Natalie, would you please, or Mr. Chairman, may I ask Natalie to distribute the amendment entitled Commerce and Business? And Mr. Chairman, if I can explain a little bit.
Yes, please do.
One of the things I've been struggling with is how the governor or any governor can respond to a disaster of some kind, but then also how can commerce, the economy, how can people's livelihoods be protected? Because if there's one thing I've noticed, or that's become very apparent over the past year or so, people's livelihoods are very important. Their ability to provide for themselves, their families, pay their bills, car payment, rent, house payment, Our economy was, well, arguably seriously damaged. I'm recalling the Kansas Chamber's testimony about that warehouse that was told it couldn't operate with one employee, even though it was just one employee in a warehouse, and that would have saved 100 jobs. I remember a contact I received from a business owner in my district who wasn't sure if his business could operate under the essential functions framework, and ended up having to lay off multiple employees who struggled to get their unemployment benefits. And of course, who can forget the many Kansans who continue to struggle to get their unemployment benefits, let alone get in contact with Department of Labor. I get contacted by people still almost every day. So this proposal I have, I readily admit, may be too broad, it may be too much, but I at least want to have a conversation about it, because I at least want businesses and people's livelihoods to have some sort of protection. And so this would basically say that notwithstanding any other provision of law to the contrary, the governor shall not have the power or authority to temporarily or permanently restrict businesses from operating or restrict the movement or gathering of individuals in connection with commerce. And I also want to say I definitely respect the process provided for by this bill, HB 2416, on pages, I believe it's 10 through 11. I definitely respect and appreciate that process. My concern is, a small business owner, and I guess for that matter, a small church, having to pay the cost of an attorney to go to court to, fight to continue to operate. It just doesn't sit well with me. So for the body's, or for the committee's consideration, I offer this amendment.
Is there a second? Representative Owens, discussion on the amendment? Representative Schreiber?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just trying to scroll through fast enough, but maybe the maker of the amendment would respond that restricting the movement or gathering of individuals in connection with commerce, would that, and maybe it's covered in the notwithstanding part, but if there was an evacuation ordered, but somebody still wanted to conduct business, how would this new section apply?
Thanks for that question. I think, and other committee members have brought this up, it's obviously difficult to conceive of every possible eventuality, and maybe the language could be changed to account for something like that. I mean, reasonably interpreted, if a town had to be evacuated and there was no possibility of, commercial activity being able to be conducted in it, well, I mean, it's not clear to me that, the people of the state that there would be a demand to conduct commerce in that town, just as an example. But this particular language doesn't specifically contemplate that sort of a possibility.
Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The representative from Emporia makes a very good point, and to his credit, the carrier of the amendment, I think, recognizes the problem with this amendment. It's vastly overbroad, and while I understand the carrier of the amendment has faith in the good faith and good intentions of Kansans, we enact black letter law, and courts have to interpret it based upon the black letter. And were this provision to be added to the law, anybody who wanted to keep their popsicle stand open in an area which was under quarantine or where there had been mass evacuation would be able to tell Kansas law enforcement, you can't stop me, you can't inquire why I'm here. I'm selling popsicles. And then as soon as the sun goes down, they'll be looting. And this is just, I don't believe this is a good idea. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion? Not seeing any. Representative Burris, you may close. Oh, there was a second. Representative Owens.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I definitely appreciate your time and the discussion. I'm guessing that there probably is not going to be a lot of support for this. So if it's agreeable to my second, I'm happy to withdraw it unless. Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll move my amendment.
Heard the motion. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Motion fails.
I'd like my vote recorded, Mr. Chair, as a no.
Okay, hold on one second. Representative Burris, or you just rate?
I wasn't going to request division, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, but I, if it's okay, if with your indulgence, I have one more, I would propose one more amendment.
Okay, so then hold on one second. So we'll recording votes. Those that voted in favor, Representative Owens, Neely, Burris. Those that wanted their no votes recorded, Representative Heiberger, Representative Carmichael. And I don't look over there. Representative Wahhabism. Surprises me over there. Okay, back to Representative Burris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee, and definitely appreciate your time. The last amendment I would propose, and Natalie, if you wouldn't mind, or if I may, Mr. Chairman, if I could have Natalie distribute 2416 essential. It would say, notwithstanding any other provision of law to the contrary, the governor shall not have the power or authority to temporarily or permanently make a determination with respect to whether a business is essential or not essential, or make any similar designation that would have a substantial negative economic effect on the business. So I would, incorporate by reference, my comments from earlier, and I would, refer again to what happened under the governor's essential functions framework, where, some businesses, well, basically winners and losers were picked, and a lot of people in my district were very, very unhappy with that. And this, I think, is an attempt to address that situation. So I would, I guess, move my amendment.
Yep. Is there a second? Representative Owens? Discussion? It's right. You don't have it yet, so we'll take some time. Unless
Can
somebody
I
just wants.
inquire of Natalie, Mr. Chairman?
Sure. Natalie?
Natalie knows everything. So in the Emergency Management Act, is there a definition or any statement within that act with respect to the term essential personnel, or is that simply a term of art that was used by the governor in her executive orders?
Mr. Chairman, to my knowledge, and I can do a quick search here. The only that term is used in KEMA a couple times, and it's not actually in KEMA itself, but in the Emergency Mutual Aid Act, but not with respect to businesses. So the term is used, but not in this kind of term of art type, and it's not defined.
It's not a defined term.
No.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Representative Humphreys?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad that this was brought up because I know all of us for months talked about what is essential, what is not, who made the decision. And there was so much confusion, and it just didn't make any sense that Ace Hardware a small one might not be essential, but of course Lowe's was, or, you know, a place where you can buy clothes like Walmart was essential, but little boutique in my district is not essential. I mean, so I wanted to just shout, can you operate safely? Can you limit your people? Like, so rather than essential or non-essential, what I wanted was, if you can operate safely, then operate. If you cannot, then don't, or limit. And I don't know that this is the answer, but essential versus non-essential was nonsensical. And I'm happy that we are at least talking about that fact. So anyway, thank you.
So here's my list of where we're at. We have Ralph, Owens, then Schreiber. So I've got you on the list if you've already waved at me. Representative Ralph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would echo the representative's comments. That was the one of the most difficult pieces along the way, and I would be really surprised if there is anyone that would disagree that that initial designation, trying to use essential, non-essential, really worked for the circumstance that we were in. And I would hope that if this situation ever arose down the road, we'd find a much better way to do that. My concern specifically with this is the amendment therein would appear to not allow for any other attempt at making that type of designation. And I think that's why I won't support the amendment, is because I think there is a way to make those designations. I just don't think the way we did it is correct. And when it talks about making any similar designation, I think precludes what the representative just talked about, of something that indicates if you can do it safely, yes. If you can't do it safely, no. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I will just jump in the list of speakers really quick and point out that I agree that this might need a little further study, but I'm hoping we caught a lot of it in that due process hearing, because as it says in the language as proposed in the bill, it says that a court shall grant the request for relief unless the court finds that the executive order is narrowly tailored to respond to the state of disaster and uses the least restrictive means to achieve that purpose. So we tried to make it, you know, you just can't blanket close everybody, but we may still need to do a little work on that. So Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, it goes without saying, if I said it once, I said it a million times. Every business is essential to the people that own it and the people that work there. And so I'm going to take every opportunity I can to protect every business owner and every employer in my state as it relates to a forced closure by the executive branch or by government, period. So I look forward to voting in favor of this and having my vote recorded.
Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as a little bit of a preamble, like on the previous amendment, my perspective is one from having been involved with the emergency planning for an accident at Wolf Creek, and that kind of colors a lot of my perspective on this bill. And so this one too seems very broad, that might conflict with those emergency plans for Coffee County and the state and at Wolf Creek, that that there's some indication where the governor would not be able to close a business if there was need for an evacuation because of this particular amendment. So that's my concern with it at this point. Thank you.
Further discussion on this amendment? Not seeing any. Representative Burris, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. I definitely appreciate comments that have been made, and specifically with respect to what Representative Owens recently said, every business is essential. Definitely couldn't agree more. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I close.
Heard the motion. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no.
No. No.
Motion fails. Division's been called. All in favor raise your hand. All opposed raise your hand. Four in favor, 12 against, and we want recorded votes. Voting yes Owens, Burris, Neely. Any no votes want recorded? Carmichael, Heiberger, Havasam. Okay, back on the bill. That's the amendments that I know of. Do we have other amendments out there? Do not see any, unless Representative Curtis or Representative Keither do, but I'm going to take their hands down for them. They're waving at me. There we go. Boom. There we go. Okay. So what is the pleasure of the committee on 2416 as amended? Representative Owens or Hoheisel, whoever speaks first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you. I make a motion that we move House Bill 2416 out favorably as amended.
Second by Representative Hoheisel. Discussion? Representative Samsel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for the reviser, and I believe one of my good colleagues to my left asked this, but I didn't fully understand the answer. If we do not pass anything out on this, and granted that the legislature is still in session through May, what implications does that have in order to respond from the legislature if the governor should issue any more orders?
Mr. Chairman, the provisions that you passed in Senate Bill 14 all expire on March 31st. And so if further action was not taken, then those provisions would expire. The old KSA 48925, as it existed before all of your work during the special session, it would go back to the way that it was before then. And while this bill doesn't have an extension of the state of disaster emergency, that is also set to expire on March 31st. So.
Thank you, Natalie. I won't repeat all of my comments, but I do have very much concern about using an emergency management statute to address what I don't believe is a true emergency in the sense that it's no longer unexpected and it could be planned for at this point. I am not going to offer a substitute motion to pass out without recommendation, but I certainly do not support the current form of it as long-term policy for Kansas. So with that, Mr. Chairman, those are my concerns. I do appreciate all the good work that everybody has done. I do hope it continues to get more work as we move forward, though. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Carmichael?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to make it clear that I speak only on my own behalf. I am a state representative from Wichita. By the way, my local Westlake Ace Hardware was open throughout the disaster. I went in the night before to stock up on plumbing parts and found out that they would be open. So I hope that if one Ace Hardware was able to be open during the disaster and the declarations, that all of them were. That aside, this bill is far superior to what our Senate colleagues have been discussing. And I'd like to describe it hopefully as perhaps a good starting place for a consensus amongst us on this committee, amongst us in the House. And I'm actually somewhat hopeful perhaps we can find common ground with the governor's office as well. There have been a lot over the weekend, making sure that we didn't violate the Open Meetings Act, but trying to make good progress and find consensus. And I think there are, where we have consensus, or at least we're getting there. The representative from Emporia makes many, many good points, and no doubt his experience in planning for contingencies at Wolf Creek make him perhaps more aware of possible unforeseens that we haven't considered. Let me just toss out a few general ideas on my own behalf. not on behalf of the governor or Democrats, but just on behalf of me. And I think the first of those has to do with the review by the Attorney General prior to the effectiveness of any executive orders by the governor. And as I read this bill, by the time the AG chimes in and the, I guess it's the LCC now, gets their bite at the apple, we may be talking 48 hours before a governor's orders that may be extremely necessary in a disaster are going to go into effect. And the example that the representative from Emporia gives is a good one. If, God forbid, we should have to activate the emergency plan for Coffee County and surrounding areas, if the wind is blowing the right way, it might, if the wind's out of the south, it might be Shawnee County as well. It could be necessary to order mass evacuations. And I would hope that people would realize that if you don't leave, you're going to die of radiation sickness. But there will always be non-believers and folks who think it's a hoax, and they will want to remain at home. And those folks in their good faith remaining at home could pay a terrible consequence. But as Mr. Klump has pointed out to us in other hearings related to these matters, there could be circumstances where bad guys also wanted to stay behind. And when you have a serious disaster, be it natural, man-made, or pandemic, there may be times that you're going to have to do some serious things that will curtail businesses, that will tell people they have to leave, that will even close churches because it's just not safe to have people there. But if the governor has to wait 48 hours and then the order can't be enforced, and then you'll have people staying behind that law enforcement can't deal with, and those people are basically called looters, and they'll be there. Be careful about what we do about delaying the implementation or effectiveness of a gubernatorial order, whether it's Sam Brownback, Joan Finney, or Derek Schmidt. Governors have to take action in emergency, and we don't always have 48 hours for legal review. A second area that I would want to call to your attention are the provisions that do provide for due process, an opportunity for quick hearing by persons who feel aggrieved by an executive order. You know, what happened last spring, and as the representative from Mulvane, I believe it is, points out, the governor took action in concern that with an impending holiday season, there could be large gatherings in churches, and we didn't know how quickly the pandemic would spread, how dangerous it would be. The governor encouraged and arguably ordered that those types of meetings not go forward, but the aggrieved parties found the judge, they found state judges, they found federal judges, they obtained relief. That's the way our system works. The concern that I have with this bill is not so much the opportunity for people to go to court, but a question of venue. Where should they go to court? And I know that I've represented people against state agencies, and I know it's really nice and convenient to bring your action in the hometown where the people are and where the effect of the state's action occurs. But the difficulty is we generally place venue for these types of lawsuits, particularly as it relates to something like the gubernatorial order in Shawnee County. And why do we do that? Well, one reason is that there are a number of judges in Shawnee County, I don't know, 20 some odd, I think. They do hear administrative law type cases fairly frequently, questions about the power of the state versus the power of the individual. there is some particular expertise on the district court bench there that makes them better equipped to decide cases like what we're talking about here without having to relearn the law or learn the law or enter orders which may be in error. That's one reason that we cite these cases in Shawnee County. A practical reason, though, is that as inconvenient as it is for me as a lawyer from Wichita to have to come to Shawnee County to represent my client, or I'm sure my friend from Dodge City would likewise feel the same way, you really can't have multiple orders related to a statewide executive order being entered in different counties all over the state, because then you will find conflicting orders. One judge thinks one thing, another judge thinks another thing. It becomes a piecemeal approach. The cases end up on appeal in front of the Court of Appeals with varying records, no uniformity in the law. Then there is the practical consideration. I don't know how many of you have been down to the governor's office to count how many lawyers there are down there, but there are less lawyers down there than there, I think, are in the Secretary of State's office. Certainly less than there used to be in the Secretary of State's office. You can easily overtax the resources of the executive branch in a time of emergency where there's lots of things going on and lots of legal decisions be made, if simultaneously lawyers for the governor are being required to appear in multiple jurisdictions, 105 jurisdictions, within a period of 72 hours. That imposes a burden on the executive, no matter who is the governor, that I don't think would be a practical one. So I would hope that thought would be given to that. There is a provision for counties to opt out of the executive orders. By default, we have created that system, I think, now. And we know that it leads to somewhat absurd results. Now, we have situations where what's right for Sedgwick County, it may not be right for Seward County, and small counties versus large counties. And one would hope that should extensive executive orders be necessary in the future, the governor, no matter who he or she is, will take that into account. But having a patchwork approach leads to great difficulty in controlling certainly a pandemic, as an example, because bad decisions, and I mean, in this instance, they were made, but bad decisions in Butler County can impact the health and welfare of people in Sedgwick County and vice versa. And I think we need to give that careful consideration. Now, I want to wrap up. We're making some progress here. People are talking, people are actually working together. This may be the starting point for really good progress, and I sure hope it is. And my hat is off to the chairman of this committee for the extensive work that he and the revisor's office and others have done. We want to keep working. I'm not going to support this bill because ultimately, I believe the governor possesses constitutional duties and obligations in time of emergency as part of the executive authority of a governor to do what's necessary to protect the health and welfare of the citizens. And so I'm not going to be supporting a bill which restricts that constitutional authority. But if my friends on this committee can work with our governor and come to an agreement that all can live with, then I'll be happy to vote for that agreement on the floor. Because if we can't, the legislature will cede whatever authority it might have to the state Supreme Court. And the court will make the decision, not the legislature. And I believe that the governor will be on solid legal grounds in saying that the legislature has usurped its authority through this legislation. So I'll be voting no, but I greatly appreciate the hard work that people are putting in, and I'm hopeful there will be further progress. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Jennings.
Well, I'm probably going to vote yes in committee, certainly reserve my vote on the floor. I think there's still some areas clearly that need, some thought. I do appreciate the work of everyone to have what we have, and I believe from my understanding of the Senate version of this would be a superior product by contrast, but still leaves open so many questions about factors that go into these things and that we've experienced. It's what's the scope of the emergency, and we're treating a single county basically like 105 counties in this bill, from what I understand. Duration has a lot to do with how people feel about where we are now. Had we had a 1 month ordeal instead of a 13-month ordeal, it probably would have been perceived a lot differently. And the intensity, I remain concerned about the inability of the legislature to convene in Shawnee County and Topeka under the right set of circumstances. We can't even meet. If we wanted to, we wouldn't be able to constitutionally if we're prohibited from getting into Shawnee County. That's just a piece of work that remains that at some point really ought to be addressed. I don't believe it can be addressed in a bill like this. I think it's a constitutional amendment, and we follow with legislation that can carry that out. And it doesn't have to be a remote meeting. It can be convened in Wichita if it's safe to be there. God knows you all can come to Garden City and convene the legislature in an emergency. We'd be happy to have you. Be good for our economy, I guess. So I have some concerns. I'm going to vote for it in the committee. I think there's still some work to be done. I expect there'll be plenty of amendments to consider when it hits the floor, going in multiple different directions. And hopefully leadership's going to set aside about 6 hours worth of time, because I'm betting this one's going to take that long.
Further discussion? Representative Humphreys.
I'd love to ask a question. I've read ours, read most of the Senate's, and the two previous representatives who spoke said they think ours is far superior to the Senate's version. And I'm just curious what they see, Mr. Chairman, if I could ask that, what they see as being far superior to the Senate's.
If they would like to answer, they're welcome to.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I never turn down the opportunity to speak.
I think she was talking to Representative Jennings.
Then I've concluded my remarks, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to defer to the distinguished jurist and lawmaker from Lakin.
Well, I would begin with this, Representative. It's a product of the House, and we know that products of the House tend to be more connected with the people on the ground because we represent smaller constituencies and have greater numbers. I think we have a little more diversity on our side of the rotunda, and we certainly come up with different products. I believe that there are things within the Senate version that throw caution a little bit too far to the wind. And seek to perhaps overly constrain an executive during an emergency situation. And I think that's where the balance needs to be struck here. Is how do you provide for some oversight, some ability to review and concur, and what gets in the way and puts people at risk unnecessarily. Again, because we just don't know. We sure didn't know what a pandemic looked like, did we? And I'm not sure we do yet, and I'm not sure we will until all of this is over and people can take a look back and go, well, what worked and what didn't work? Kind of the after action review that I expect someone with emergency management and probably plenty of others will be doing. But I think we're going down a decent path. It's one worth debating. I don't know if I
Discussion?
answered your question. I don't know if I answered your question or not, but probably if the Senate bill was in this committee right now, I probably wouldn't vote for it.
We can talk more about it. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Not seeing any. I thank you all. We've had good discussion. Certainly have more work to do in the coming days, no matter what. As everyone has spoken to the fact that the Senate version is not the same as the House, and the governor, I'm sure, would like something different as well. And so I don't know what the plan for the bill is after this. Maybe we debate it this week on the floor, maybe we don't. And then we'll see how we maneuver our way to conference. That's for somebody who gets paid more than me to figure out. So we'll wait for their guidance and go from there. Assuming it passes out of committee, I guess I should allow Representative Owens to close, and we'll see if we've accomplished this step.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no.
No.
Motion appears to carry. Motion does. Those voting in favor, they want their votes recorded Owens, Hoheisel. Those wanting their negative votes recorded, Heiberger, Carmichael, O'Habisam. Well, thank you all. We are now done with our work until turnaround, or until I tell you otherwise, but hopefully we're done until after turnaround. Yes, Representative Humphreys.
I think I got a list from Legislative Research that had all the dates of the emergency declarations of every state and when they were going to expire. And it was really interesting. 2 have already expired. Maybe 5 are going to expire this week, and then various dates and things. And I don't know if anyone's interested, but I found it quite interesting because, as you know, we've talked about, how much do we need a declaration right now? And I found it interesting. If anybody would like me to send it to them, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, committee?
Yes,
Representative
Mr.
Carmichael?
Yeah, in view of the requirements of the Kansas Open Meetings Act, I think if it's going to be, I don't know whether we've already crossed the line, but make sure that it doesn't get circulated to more than the requirements allowed by the Open Meetings Act, or it could be made a miscellaneous document that just attached to this hearing, and then we'd be in the clear on that.
Yeah, we could do that. We'll have Representative Humphrey send it to Kathy, and Kathy can send it out. That way we all have it, whether we want it or not, and you can look at it. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you all. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you again.